Good evening. Calling to order the regular, actually it's a special meeting of the Sonoma Planning Commission. And can we get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Willers.
Here.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Here.
Commissioner or Vice Chair DAMBACH. Sorry.
Here.
Chair Barnett.
Here.
Commissioner O'Gorman Jenkins.
Here.
Commissioner Nugent.
Here.
I would like to point out that Commissioner WIRICK and Commissioner BARBOSE are absent from tonight's meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. And now our next order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Nathan, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? You know the words. Yeah, fake it if you have to.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, I've had a request from our planning director, community development director, as we call it now, to switch the agenda tonight and move the active transportation plan presentation and discussion up to the beginning of the agenda instead of waiting for the end. My only concern is that there may be people who, looking at the agenda in advance, have figured, okay, they've got these other items, I'm going to show up at 6:30 or 7 o'clock instead, only to find we've done it, but I wanted to get your opinion before I agreed to the change.
You're such an optimist. I think we should go ahead and make the change.
I agree.
Okay, we will go ahead and alter the agenda. I think I need a motion for that.
Yes, so my recommendation is to move item 5 items for discussion before item 4 public hearing.
Okay, can we have a motion?
Motion to
effect?
move?
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Commissioner O'Gorman Jenkins.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Yes.
Commissioner Nugent.
Aye.
Commissioner Willers.
Yes.
Vice Chair DAMBACH.
Yes.
Chair Barnett.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. Now the next order of business is comments from the public. These are comments on items that are not on the agenda. Anything that's on the agenda, you will have the opportunity to come and speak. If you do have something, please just come up to the microphone, give your name for the record, and tell us what you have to say.
Hi, Commission. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Joe Cuneo, Joecuneo. I live at 711 Level Valley Road. Don't know if I needed to tell you that, but if anybody wants to throw eggs or something, that's where I live. But anyway, I would like to speak about the rezoning of agricultural property in the city limits of Sonoma. I guess it is kind of an ATP issue because the bike path does currently and will hopefully someday abut the 6 agricultural parcels in Sonoma. But I would also like to speak about the relevance of the general plan discussion that we've been having, and most specifically in regards to the elements of open space, conservation, and safety. First, I would like to say that I'm a huge fan of rezoning wine production, or removing wine production from the general plan and replacing it with mixed commercial, Sonoma mixed commercial, I think we're calling it. It's a huge opportunity for our community. There's 16 acres of abandoned buildings, asphalt, office space, and this is a great opportunity to add life to this area, much needed housing, hotels for TOT, and we all know we need it for the budget and Measure T and whatnot. It's just a great opportunity. What I was a little taken back by was how we lumped into this rezoning, this mixed commercial rezoning, the historic Mission Vineyard. This vineyard is turning 200 years old next year. It's been around since is that my time already? Oh, it's a 200-year-old vineyard, 199 years old. There's even a plaque that says it's the first vineyard, if you guys see right at the end of the bike path, first vineyard in Northern California. It's pretty cool. This is a pretty special area with the patch and the Mission Vineyard. And I don't care if you've been here for generations. I don't care if you just moved here or you're a tourist on a little three-wheeler. It's a really unique, special area. And I think we should really think hard about that conversation and of you know, again, open space, conservation, and safety. It's what makes our community unique, the agriculture and the history. So in closing, I would like to encourage you guys, I say you guys, and the city council and staff and the community to just reconsider lumping all these things together and calling them mixed commercial. It might be the same that the properties are all owned by one applicant, but to take wine production and rezone it mixed commercial is a different conversation, I think, than taking historical vineyards and calling that and rezoning them mixed commercial as well. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, and I have a question for you while
Absolutely.
you're here. I was a little, you sent me a note, and I apologize for not
Yeah.
getting back to you. You were interested in exploring converting some additional properties that are not included in the Sebastiani property.
My desire is to have this agricultural property stay agricultural. But if it is going to be a case where everything's getting rezoned mixed commercial, then I want to have that conversation.
No, I understand, and
Yeah.
my question is the properties in question that are yours within the city limits?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
That's all I
Yeah,
needed to clarify.
yeah. And they are, you know, I don't know, they're adjacent, and they were Sebastiani properties. They were never owned by the current owner of Sebastiani Vineyards, but they have historically been Sebastiani properties in the city limits.
Okay, thank
Cool.
you.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Nathan?
I wasn't planning on saying anything, but that comment was so cool. I had to get up and say something. I completely concur and agree with the gentleman's comment about agricultural, not treating an entire property that currently is in one ownership for rezoning without thinking about the overall integrated view of what that means for overall Sonoma with regard to rezoning. And it jogged my memory for another comment that I'd given in the past, which I want to reiterate and add to that, which is thinking about the open space zoning and the kind of zoning I've seen in other communities, which is open space zoning that's private property, so that we can do a full audit and accounting and understand what kind of land we actually have and how that contributes overall to Sonoma. So we understand what the assets are of the community for our planning. And so, for example, Davis or since other communities will identify open space that's part of an HOA structure, which is community open space, common pool open space. And so that way they can do proper planning and understand how areas integrate and come together if that might be community or Sonoma land open space, and how it merges into community-owned HOA open space, or like this historic area that the gentleman's talking about, or other cultural assets that might be state parks. And so we have a full accounting and can see what the mosaic of these lands are across the community that are of interest not just for residents but also visitors to our community, which is a big part of what our economic assets are. And so I wanted to layer that on and say that this really is an integrated view that we want to take for our city when we think about what we're doing with our zoning laws as well. So there you go. Thanks.
Thank you. Just as a note, this process that has taken place, for example, at the City Council about land uses is just the very beginnings of the process. There's no definitive action was taken. Nothing would be codified until the general plan is approved and the land use is approved with it. So we're really at the formative stages, which is a good time to bring these things up. But I have had some people ask me, gee, you know, has a hotel now been approved for the Sebastiani? And I had to explain to them that no, nothing has been approved. This is just a change in the zoning that might allow someone to apply and would still have to go through the ordinary process of project approval. Okay, seeing no one else, we'll move to the consent calendar, which is the minutes from our special meeting. We seem to have only special meetings lately, of September 17. Are there any changes, corrections, or additions to the meetings that anyone would like to make? And if not, I would entertain a motion for approval. All items on the agenda are open for public comment.
There's several misspellings of people's names who gave comment at the September 17th meeting.
Okay, if you can provide those to Natalie,
Okay.
she can go ahead and correct the record. Thank you for that. Anything else? Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
I was not here, so. So
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Gorman Jenkins,
Abstain, I was not here.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Willers,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dombach,
Yes.
Chair Barnett.
Abstain. Abstain.
I don't know what those numbers are, but that concludes roll call.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move up to the next item. Having changed the agenda, we're going to take up item 5.1, the Sonoma Active Transportation Plan update.
So good evening, Chair and Commissioners. So presenting tonight is going to be Erin Ferguson from Fair and Piers, and she'll be presenting the active transportation current update of the draft plan. Specifically, there'll be some comments for the county as a whole, because it is a countywide plan, and then specific to Sonoma itself. And so we are still in, and I'm sure that'll be part of the slides, is we're still in the process of accepting comments on this plan, and look forward to the final one early next year. So with that, I'm going to pass that on.
Let me just interrupt for a second. Ma'am, we switched the order of the agenda.
Perfect. I arrived right at the right moment.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
All right. Excuse me. Thank you for having me this evening. So I'm going to give you an overview of what is in the draft active transportation plan. And we'll start kind of at the beginning, the purpose of the plan. And so this is, as was alluded to, this is a plan that's being developed alongside seven other active transportation plans for Sonoma County. So there's a countywide, a CTA active transportation plan, yourselves included as a standalone active transportation plan for the city of Sonoma. And then there are 6 other local jurisdictions, including unincorporated county, that also we've been developing active transportation plans for them as well. So big picture, the purpose of this update, for many participating in this effort, it's been in roughly 10 years since an update to the bicycle and pedestrian plan. And so this is an opportunity to be thinking about these modes and thinking about the vision for active transportation in Sonoma. The other kind of elements of this, one is a focus on thinking about all ages and abilities. And so this is a kind of reflecting an evolution in transportation planning and engineering, that the more we can do from an infrastructure side to create infrastructure that's enjoyable, lower stress, more safe for people to be walking and biking and rolling, the more people who will actually choose to do that. And so thinking about all ages and abilities as we design and plan for improvements. Regional connection, so a bit alluded to already, but with this effort being in parallel with other communities in the county, it allows for more regional coordination in terms of how the different facilities connect at jurisdictional boundaries. And then implementation, so portions of the plan really focus on providing resources to help support staff as projects from the plan would advance towards implementation. So now we'll get into an overview of the plan content. So this is the vision statement in the plan, and it reads, our guiding principles are to improve safety, connectivity, equity, and quality of life. Walking, biking, and rolling shall be safe and appealing modes for people of all ages and abilities to use for everyday transportation and recreation. The plan also includes 3 goals, which we're showing here. So the first being connected and reliable, the second safe and well-maintained, and the third community-oriented and place-based. So within the document, we start by describing characteristics of today and sharing some maps and some figures and some tables that summarize kind of the existing conditions. So on this map, we're showing the existing bikeways within the city, and we have the different color lines indicating whether they're bike lanes or a multi-use path or designated bike route. As part of this effort, we also looked at and mapped what are the existing sidewalk gaps. So where do we have sidewalks missing either on one or both sides of the street and the approximate extents. And so with that existing conditions information and some earlier technical analysis that we did, we began to identify potential projects, opportunities, and needs. And as part of this process, that included gathering input from the community. And so we did that a few different ways. So last fall, we had an online survey, an interactive map where people could provide comments. We also went to several events, pop-up events within the Harvest Market, for example, last October, to gather people's input on concerns or locations for focus. And then as we kind of moved from last fall into the winter, we put together the draft projects and priorities. And then spring, earlier this year, brought those back to the community, again, through pop-ups, as well as a workshop event in May to gather people's input on the draft projects. And there was also an opportunity to provide comments on draft projects through the project website, another interactive mapping exercise. So from that, we developed and have arrived at what this map is showing is proposed bikeway corridor projects. And so again, the different colors indicate the different types of bike facilities. You'll see multi-use paths, bike lanes, as well as some new terminology and new colors relative to the existing map. So one of those being separated bike lanes or bikeways, and that's where we provide more physical separation between the space where people bike and the space where cars are moving. And so that's part of thinking about creating a network and facilities for all ages and abilities. And then the circles on this map are crossing improvements, and those are crossing improvements both for people biking and people walking. And then this map is showing the sidewalk gap projects, using that information about where there's missing sidewalk, essentially like inventorying and taking account of where those potential sidewalk projects are located. We also kind of put this all together here on this map so you can see the existing network alongside or with the proposed bike projects and crossing improvements on top of it. And so again, the idea is looking at ways in which we can create more connectivity for the active transportation network, as well as enhance existing portions of it. So from the projects that we developed, we did some prioritization to help sort and think about what could be higher priority, medium priority, and low priority, given the amount of projects. And this also helps staff think about funding opportunities, grant opportunities, things of that nature. And so in identifying those priorities, these are the criteria that we use. So thinking about which projects are improving safety at locations where we know there's maybe more of a need to improve safety, improving access to things like transit routes or improving access to schools. So taking into consideration those different types of criteria to prioritize and sort the projects. And then the plan also includes policies that are organized based on those 3 goals that I mentioned earlier. And generally, the policies are speaking to things like coordinating with other public agencies as part of planning and implementation, applying and using industry best practices as we advance a project through further into design and implementation, kind of looking for consistency across other adopted plans and documents, including language around supporting those education and encouragement programs and so forth. The plan includes some information about those potential funding sources, both at a regional, state, and federal level. And then some information around monitoring. So as we think about implementing the plan, this gives some kind of focused measures or metrics that we can look at both in terms of what's being implemented as well as performance or outcomes from what's been implemented or built. So we are in a place where we have the public draft active transportation plan available for comment on the project website, and it will be available through the end of November, and then we'll be working on producing the final version for adoption in early 2025. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. At this point, are there any questions? Yes, Ms. O'Neill.
Thank you. Couple of questions. First, I definitely want to see runners included in there. I didn't see us mentioned at all. The other thing, and I just want to highlight that because it's different than walking or cycling, and I just want to make sure that we're included. Also, on the path, on the map, I did not notice a circle for easier transportation crossing on Denmark and 8th Street. And that's a really critical one because it's a huge biking path as well as running path. So right on the intersection of Denmark and 8th Street, it's often used by the companies that offer tourist bike rides all over Sonoma, and they're crossing that path all the time, and 8th Street's rather busy. So I would definitely like to see a circle added at that intersection, Denmark Street and 8th Street East. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Willers?
More a comment along the lines of regional connections. And I know it's outside of the city limits, but there are many improvements targeted that lead to potential regional connections. I looked at the website, I looked at what the regional plan was, and it struck me that, I'm from the cyclist side. Highway 12 North out of beyond Agua Caliente turns to, it's got a white line and a shoulder, and when they repaved it, they didn't repave the shoulder. They left it, and it also has, for a majority of it, probably 6 to 8 inch drop off on a 1 foot wide shoulder. And so, that's a strong regional connection from here, riding from Sonoma to Santa Rosa. And if it was more accommodating, it's much safer actually than Arnold Drive, which has all kinds of issues related to it. Lack of visibility and lack of shoulder and lack of shoulder beyond the shoulder. And then the second one is the connection off of Denmark. And then when I look at the regional plan, it's using essentially Highway 121 as the connection to Napa. And, while that's nicely paved, it's not very accommodating to people walking because of the hill, maybe for running.
Nope.
But that's my choice now because Ramal Road is so disastrous in terms of its paving. And much the same way as Denmark. Denmark's almost impossible to ride. And Ramal is getting that way because of the wine traffic on it, because of the heavy equipment that drives on it and the soils that are underlying it. But if that road was improved, which they've done from the Napa line to Napa, they repaved that several years ago, that is a much safer, much calmer environment for everyone. And there are people who walk that. There are many people who ride it. And there are many people who run it. Where up and over the hill is now safer, I do it that way, but it's not for the majority of people. And so, you know, the practicality of where the improvements should be pinpointed and getting the most bang for the dollar for the most people to use it and actually encourage them to use it, I think should be a goal. And rather than just saying, well, this is an easy way to get there and Denmark ends at it. The reality is Denmark ends at Burndale. Burndale goes out to the highway and across and then out Ramal. And that's a much nicer bike ride. It's just that the infrastructure doesn't allow for it to be enjoyable any longer. And so that's my primary consideration, is once we get to the city's edges, what does it actually connect to and where does it go? Highway 12, I know, has been a long conversation. As long as I've been here, they've been talking about improving Highway 12 from a multi-use standpoint, and nothing's happened, really. So anyway, those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Donna?
I'll ask my questions and I'll save my comments for later. So, you know, as I was going through the report, I noticed that there are 57 proposals total. 34 are tier 1, 16 are tier 16 are tier 2, tier 3 and 7 are tier 2. And I'm just wondering, I mean, I know what you showed us in terms of how you came up with those tier levels, but what I'm wondering is, what are the specifics on those tiers regarding actions and completions? There's nothing in there. You've categorized them, you've done a great job, but so what? Like as I read through the document, even at the implementation, there's like no implementation plan. So my first question is, are all tier 1s going to be completed in 2025? Do you have any time? Can we have some time bounding on these, more than just saying these are important and these aren't? Likewise, 32 policies. And again, I appreciate the depth and the breadth of the policies, but you know, when I was in business, if we had 32 policies for a goal, it would never fly because they become diluted. And so I'm just wondering how in the world we would keep track of those policies and really implement them in a tangible manner. So, you know, it asks that it's great to have a lot of policies, but can we really make them things that are actionable and not passive? And really things that are similar to what Commissioner Willer said, things that are really going to move the needle on what we're doing versus just the volume of what we're putting forward. And then on one specifically, there was a project number 171, and there was some language about a redesign study, and I didn't know what that meant. So I was curious what that specifically meant. Does that mean mini roundabouts? I think it was for traffic calming. And I can pull it up, but I don't.
Are you talking about 5th Street West?
Project 170. I don't have the.
Yeah, Broadway and Leveroni.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what does redesign study mean?
Yeah, that would be a study intentionally to look at that intersection, understand more specifically what are the volumes, what are the speeds, what are the maybe constraints from a right-of-way perspective, and investigate what kinds of improvements or engineering treatments could better serve, in this context, people walking and biking and crossing the street there.
Okay, so it's any of those tools in that toolbox.
Yep. Yeah.
And finally, table 5. I didn't really fully understand the title. Does the title mean that all the funding will be in 2025? I think it was said it was an action plan for 2025. So, and it's literally a list of $32 million worth of things to be done.
Yeah, I'm happy to clarify the approach to prioritization and the contents of that table. So often, yes.
Before you answer that, I just want to clarify a point that may make your job easier. This action plan doesn't include the funding for any projects, if I understand it and have read it correctly.
Correct. It's unconstrained from a funding perspective.
Okay. So at this point, this is an aspirational document dependent upon the city's ability to get grants and
Correct.
secure funding for these projects. So there's nothing actually that's planned to be paid for.
Thank you. I know I was setting up my comments for later,
I see.
but
Okay.
I wanted to just get it on record.
Please proceed.
Okay, thanks. The reference to the year 2025 in this document is in anticipation of this document being adopted in 2025, not implemented in its entirety in 2025. And that's to differentiate from the prior bicycle and pedestrian plan that was adopted in 2014. So we can change the nomenclature to clarify if that makes things easier and clearer for the future, but that was the thought behind that particular labeling that you'll see in some of the figures and in some of the tables. And that table 5 is a high-level cost estimate that looks at, for each grouping of priority projects, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and each type of project, type of bike facility, or type of pedestrian improvement in those tiers, an approximate cost for implementation. And so that's what that table is showing and how it's organized. Specific to the priorities and the way in which they're grouped into those 3 different tiers, there was an intentionality on our part to not attempt to say, do this project first, do this project 6th, do that project 57th, because a lot of times with active transportation in particular, but generally transportation projects, there's a need for staff to be opportunistic. So land use projects can come along and there could be an opportunity to condition a developer for improvements, related to things on their frontage. Or there are often grant programs. We've identified many in this document, but they change with administrations at a federal level. So the state funding landscape changes, what programs exist, the criteria that those programs grade projects change, and we don't always know when or how or what will change. And so it's really beneficial for staff to have the flexibility to say, well, we know this grouping of projects are high priority for these reasons. And the criteria we used are often the types of criteria used to select projects in those competitive grant funding programs. So it gives them a very solid starting place when those opportunities arise. But it's in part because this is an unconstrained plan financially, and because funding landscape changes from one year to the next for transportation projects. There's an intentional what we would characterize as flexibility for staff to work from.
Okay, any other questions from the commission? Yes.
Aaron, are Fair and Pierce working with Sonoma County on this same project?
Yes.
Okay, great. So there is some natural synergy there. So I appreciate Bill Willer's comments, and I would echo that and say Napa County on Ramal Road makes Sonoma look so bad. So we definitely need to give that some attention. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll add we've, with SCTA's help, also have been coordinating with Caltrans District 4, so they are also doing their bicycle and pedestrian planning activities now as well. And so there's been lots of conversations about SR 12.
Okay, no other questions. I'll bring it to the participation for the attendees at the meeting tonight. If you have comments.
How long do I have? How fast do I have to talk?
How long do you need?
I won't go too long.
Please go on.
All right. I'm Eris Weaver. I'm the Executive Director of the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition. And we've been following these ATP plans throughout the whole county because we want to make sure it all gets done right. Since, as Aaron mentioned, so much funding and other things happen depend on what's in the plan. And we will be going in on that map and making more specific comments at specific places. So I'm going to keep my comments to kind of just the overall in my reading what is in here for your plan here bike-wise. You're not bold enough. It's not bold enough. The only place I see on the plan where there's proposed a Class 4 protected bike lane is on Leveroni. Now, when in 2014, when the last plan was done, this class of bikeway did not exist. The legislation created it happened in 2014, and the actual standards for it didn't happen until a year or two later. So you may not have had experience with those, but other cities in the county are going to town installing them. Other parts of the Bay Area have a lot of them, and I've ridden them, and they make such a difference in how safe you feel and are on a roadway. So the areas that are part of your high injury network and that have the highest stress on the map, Highway 12, 8th Street East, what the proposal on there is for buffered bike lanes. That's not enough for the amount of traffic and the speed on those roads to convince more new people. I mean, people like me and Mr. Willers are going to ride on all kinds of stuff, right? But if you want more kids riding to school or other people who are not quite as confident, you want to make the higher level of protection. Now, of course, right, we know that's a Caltrans bikeway, but they're getting better about stuff than actually, most of you probably remember a few years back when Broadway was repaved, Caltrans was willing to put in protected bike lanes. And your council at the time flip-flopped back and forth and voted and ended up voting against them. So I think there's no reason not to put Class 4 bike lanes in for those areas. Can't get funding for them if you don't have them in the plan. So I think that's a good step to take. My other concern or comment, and the folks from Fair and Pierce have heard me make this in every single jurisdiction, is how many bike boulevards are in there. And I'll tell you why that always makes me a little itchy. The Class 1, Class 2, and Class 4 types of bikeways have a very specific, this is what it is. So when you say you're putting in a Class 2 lane, everybody knows that's the strip of paint. If it's Class 4, there's going to be some protection. But the Bike Boulevard Class 3, there's a whole suite of treatments you can use. But that's not in the plan. And I've seen too many jurisdictions just paint some sharrows on the street and call it a Class 3 bikeway and say, woohoo, we made more bikeways, when a sharrow doesn't do anything at all. So that whole category makes me nervous and means we'll be watching very closely when there's one that's being implemented to make sure that something is actually being done and not just painting sharrows. So I think that's probably enough for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just say ditto to all that. So I have a couple of comments. I sent in a lot of comments about this plan. And the comments that I sent in really were repeat comments from about a year's worth of comments, because we've repeated about how Fifth Avenue West has been very dangerous. There's actually data about that. There's also best practices that when you hit over 5,000 cars, that you really should have a separate bike lane for safety. When I was at a university, when you would repeat back what you heard, that was basically sea-level work. If you would fuse together different plans, maybe you would get a B- in my class. And so that's what we're seeing. We've got some plans here from the county. We've got our 3.0 circulation plans. We've got the Caltrans district regional plans. We've got the general plan update. We're not even seeing plan information being shared across all these general plans that have different kinds of data that are addressing very similar issues, but we're not even bringing that information together. Really what we want for this city, though, is an A-level plan. An A-level plan is integration and analysis that brings together thoughtful commentary, brings together data, brings together community input. We're not getting that. And so what do I think that we're doing here? To me, we're in the 9 circles of planning hell. So let me just take a moment and take us through that journey, because I don't really need to be repeating years worth of commentary that people have been coming up here. I didn't ask anybody to come with me this time. People have been coming up meeting after meeting. They don't really want to be doing this anymore. So the first circle, the limbo of ignorance, where we live blissfully unaware of all this community input, trapped into this fog of ambiguity. Despite countless meetings, voices have been lost in the mist of forgotten, diluted, misrepresented, and ignored, because these comments have been here over and over and again. So this second circle of hell, the gluttony of data. So we're encountering the sin of gluttony, where the plan just devours data without digesting it properly. There's been surveys, there's been reports, there's been studies, but we failed to extract the real meat, leaving us with these hollow conclusions. We've provided feedback, information, letters, presentations. To what end? Well, we can't see it. We're not seeing it in any of these plans. So now we come to the third circle of planning hell, the greed of resources. Yep, greed. We've poured resources into this process, time, energy, yes, money, lots of money. But the documents and materials that return to us again and again just keeps asking for us to keep coming back over and over and over again. This is not really what this small community can do. They can't afford to be here. So the wrath of people, we're getting to the wrath. It's not the planners, no. The wrath of the community is starting to, watching this process, refuse to honor these promises and the contributions that leave us with these plans that show no integration or no application of analysis. And so we arrive at the sin of heresy, where the plan misrepresents the very data that's been shown across these various other plans, and the needs of the residents. So this plan, what's happening is you aren't looking at the population that you have. Some of this, you know what kinds of people live in Sonoma. We have a naturally occurring retirement community. We heard from those people. We need to represent the needs of the infrastructure and align it with where the schools are, with where the residents live. We just had an accident with a woman who was critically injured. Now, I'm not saying that a better plan would have avoided that, but we know where these unsafe areas are, and people have asked to have infrastructure that improves safety or traffic calming. And so we've got now violence against the future generation, the seventh circle. It's not the physical sense, but the reckless disregard for future generations to make a beautiful city that's safe and walkable, with green spaces that we've promised to people. And so the eighth circle, this great visionary future, which is what a general plan is supposed to deliver to us. And these independent plans are part of that. And so we need to deliver this quality of this promise of a fantastic future. And so finally, the ninth circle, this treachery against the community. This is a betrayal to not deliver upon the community's time, energy, and willingness to commit. this is part of your job. This is part of the city council's job. This is part of the job of all of us here. So I'm here speaking for them again. They've been here before. They don't need to keep coming away. Don't leave us with a plan that fails to represent the city we love. We're asking you to build a city for people who want to be connected, who want to walk, who want to ride their bicycles, who want to run, and who want to do it safely without risk of life and limb. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else in the audience want to make a comment? If not, we'll bring it back. Oh, okay, all right. You've sat here through it all.
Joe Cuneo again. This was really cool. It's exciting to see so much attention and energy go into bike paths and transportation. Realize a lot of it's the county stuff we're talking about. I today was running across 8th Street myself, and I biked several times. It's awesome that we're talking about this stuff. It's there. We can improve it. It's great. And that you're collaborating with the county, because obviously they have a lot of resources. They know how to get grants. It seems like the guys, Ken Tam and Steve Eric work with that. Yeah. So exciting that there's a lot of energy. One thing I wanted to comment on, and I know this is probably outside of the jurisdiction of this, is e-bikes. I love e-bikes. I think they're super green, getting people out of the house that normally wouldn't get out of the house. But I do think we need to kind of have speed limits as to what e-bikes on bike paths, if they're in a bike lane going really fast. I think they should just get out and drive in the middle of the road and be a motorcycle at that point. So of course there's kids on e-bikes going fast. So I think that's something for overall safety for walkers and other bikers that we always kind of need to have something in mind. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
30 seconds.
Come on up.
About the Caltrans bike plan that they're working on now, there's only a week or two left for them to make comments, and I've been looking at it, and it focuses so much on the more urban parts of the Bay Area. But in their current plan, Highways 12 and 116 are listed at low or medium priority, and I am pushing at them to move those up to a higher priority, since those are main streets for so many of our different towns. So I would urge everyone in the room, and I can send you all the link, to go to the Caltrans plan and tell them to move our main street / state highways higher up the priority list.
Okay, thank you. All right, seeing no further public comment, I will close the public comment and bring it back to the commission for discussion and commentary.
I have a few comments. I think what you just mentioned is another example of the lack of integration, and the fact that we have a plan here, and where is that on the plan? Like, where is that, knowing where the priority is for Caltrans in our town? And that integration of prioritization. There's a lot of mention of Caltrans on it, obviously, but that's just an example. I'm just going to make a few comments. I sent in more detailed comments to Jennifer, and I'm going to try to be as transparent as possible, because I really want this to be successful. We are a small town. We should be able to do this. But the thing that I'm most worried about is how passive we are. I think the city is very passive. Even when I read Chapter 1, it says, the City of Sonoma did not identify any local programs specific to active transportation due to budget and staff constraints. And that the city also plans to coordinate and participate in the actions of other regional areas. And I understand what that means, right? That's the coordination. But it sounds passive to me. And ultimately, this plan is not a plan. It's just a litany of things that we've discovered, potential funding, potential policies, 57 line items that aren't really integrated. And I don't see a plan. I don't see an implementation plan. Again, when I did plans, they were called SMART goals. They were specific, measurable, they were achievable, they were relevant, and they were time bound. I don't see that. And I know this is aspirational, But my comment is that can we make this more tangible? And with regard to prioritization, I totally agree. There are areas in the city that are so high stress for our residents that why can't we have a plan that integrates those regions like West East, Fifth Street West, Highway 12? I think if we don't write these things down and we passively hope for a grant, nothing's going to get done. And we don't even have the resources to write a grant. So that's where I was coming up with the fact that who's going to do all this stuff? And poor Jennifer doesn't have the staff to do it. And I just think that there needs to be more than intentional flexibility. I understand what that means, but if this is just thrown out there without some kind of cohesive goal, even writing grants is hard. You have to have a story for a grant. You have to have a compelling story because they're very competitive. And I think a more competitive grant might be one, even with the Office of Traffic Safety, right, which you reference. A more compelling grant would be one where we say, here's this corridor, and here are the things that we want to do in this corridor to get that. So again, without going into a lot of detail, those are my concerns. There's no implementation plan here. There's nothing tangible. So if I would ask that we put some real teeth in this and not make it so high level that it never gets done. And my last comment is I agree with you. I bike a lot too. And when I looked at table 2, we talk about these bike boulevards. There are several projects. Only project 11 says with traffic calming treatments. The rest of them don't say anything. So I don't know what's in the bike boulevards there. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 projects that are called bike boulevards with no mention of traffic calming. Again, I'll just end there, but this is the beginning of a plan. It's not an implementable plan or a strategic plan. I do appreciate all that's been gathered, though.
Okay.
I have a couple of comments. For many, many years, a long distance runner, and I have logged in the miles on Rommel Road and Dale, and so I know exactly what you're talking about. Today, in this time of my life, I'm a long distance walker. And I concur with Commissioners Willers and O'Neill's comments. I'm particularly interested in the sidewalk gaps. I know this town walking by the back of my hand, and particularly the state of disrepair in the sidewalks that are existing. Where does that come in the plan in repairing those? And also, I'd be curious, where are we adding in more sidewalks? Just commentary there of the existing sidewalks, and then where we can actually add sidewalks so that this is a safe and connected. Like you can literally walk from, one side of town to the other side of town without having to cross a dirt path to get to a parking lot that then takes you to somewhere else. Those are my comments. Sidewalks.
Thank you. Further comments? You have a question? Go ahead.
Just a question of staff and also the presenter. So we're looking at early adoption in 2025. At least that's the projected goal. And it sounds like, based on the comments from the public and the comments from my colleagues, which I really appreciated. Jennifer, can you maybe comment, is there going to be other opportunities for us to weigh in? I appreciated the comments from my colleague, Commissioner DAMBACH, because I had questions about funding allocation, the extent to which we had engaged the community, and it sounds like there's still some gaps. I did have concerns about the tier prioritization. And then maintenance costs. I was wondering how this was going to address existing sidewalks and disrepair. And then obviously there's been a lot of issues raised about safety. So just would like to understand what it means for early adoption in 2025 and what the process may look like going forward.
As far as the process, I'll let them respond. And I know Dana is online as well from SCTA. This is a grant-funded project for SCTA to complete this, and have invited us to participate at no cost. So we are participating. Mike Berger and I have both participated since the beginning of the process started. Active transportation plans, I've worked on these in other places too. I have also done active transportation plans, and then after that did the implementation plan, where we made more concerted effort. It is a more of a high-level plan so that you get things on paper so that you can go after the funds. You know, when we talk about working with other entities, we are super small, and so we on our own really have a hard time qualifying on our own. So we partner and join, and I know Dana can talk to this. We're doing a project now that we'll be doing by one of the projects by the school near 5th Street, Cesarini. And I know that was, you know, a combination project. We put our project in the bigger bucket. I'm working with the county parks to do the 8th Street East grants. They've applied for 2 grants so far just for the acquisition of the land in order to put in that plan along 8th Street East. And so that's where we go with, there's certain things. There's definitely times where there's opportunities that we were talking about arise for a specific type of project, and then we'll go after that project. I had an engineer tell me one time, I don't really care what your tiers are. If I have money for it, I'm just going to go after that project for that. And my point was always, can you at least make sure it's a project on our plan? So there's always that component to it as well. There's also, you know, so I do want to put that out there. This is the time in which, if there are specific comments, and I think it's in November or the end of this month?
End of November 30th.
November 30th, to still respond. And so, you know, I just emailed Cedra just saying if there's very specific ones that we feel have not been incorporated, you know, let me know. And then that way I can respond to maybe why it doesn't look specifically that way. You know, we as staff, we know that 5th Street, especially at Napa, that's why there is a project designated for that. We need to study that intersection, and we need to study that pedestrian crossing at Safeway. I almost hit people all the time there. Like, you have a hard time seeing people when it's such a far expanse that they're crossing. And so we wanted to make sure we identified those. We also identified some bike lanes to nowhere on the last plan and tried to get those off and make sure that we were making connections between parts of town that maybe had been not incorporated. But we're also trying to take an understanding of what our right-of-ways are when we were identifying types too, knowing that we're not really going to have that opportunity to, nor would we. It's a huge effort to basically go and try to get more land, especially when we've already have these improvements in place. It's easier for new developments as it's identified. If you've noticed, 5th Street West right now at Hummingbird has demolished that sidewalk because they need to pull it in so that we can get the bike lane and the parking and everything that was a continuation of that design with that development. So I did want to point that out. So if there are specific things in there, I just need to know so that we can work together so that I can understand or explain maybe some specifics. There are a lot of policies. I did read through them, but they all are applicable. They're all things that we need to just keep maintaining awareness of. Are there different levels of those? Yes. Could some of them be pushed and kind of grouped? We had talked a little bit about grouping some of those into a more generalized category. When we look at policies, in this case, we have, I think, 3 main goals, and then there's policies within each goal and then a subset. The action aspect, what my plan is the ATP, for the county, we are a participant, and so we can use this plan, and we can use it with SCTA to go after the funding. The other component is we are doing our circulation element right now. We want to be consistent with the typologies and the projects, but we, in our circulation element process, can identify more of that implementation in those actions. And that's where we really need to work with Public Works, right, and to create a CIP plan for which projects we want to, on each funding cycle. I'm working with Climate Action right now to identify all the grants that we can think of and understand what their cycles are, what projects we want to go for, because that is one of the ad hoc groups. 4 is on transportation for Climate Action, and one of those is implementing our ATP. And so it's going to take a group effort of all of us, because like you said, we are a small but mighty team. And we're going to have to partner. Even Public Works is a small team, and so sometimes it's not a constraint of, money so much as it's a constraint of time to go after these projects. And I think ATPs typically are 10-year plan-ish.
5 to 10 years is the horizon, yeah.
And as we know, we're doing a 20-year general plan in a bigger sense. But this ATP, if we want to in the future, we can always amend it for ourselves. This is a county document, but this small component is ours. So we can then take this and amend it. It's ours after this. So I hope that answers some of that.
Ask you one question. I mean, it's really around what you feel you have the capacity for. So, I know you're interconnected, but how do you realistically see this being able to be implemented based on the size of the staff or what you need?
Mm-hmm. So, again, it goes back to that team effort as far as I didn't even know that the county parks was applying for those grants until they reached out and said, can you provide us a letter? I am newer to this region versus where I was from. But even there, Public Works is responsible for implementation. They're the ones that are going to do the work on the streets. And so it's working in concert with them. Planning and engineers, I don't know if you've been around us, but you're an architect, architects, planners, engineers, we all work together, but we are always not quite there together. And it's the same thing, we're trying to, we plan things out and engineers look at us like we're crazy because they like to just do. And we like to plan. But it's just working closer with that group. And identifying those opportunities and saying, okay, we have an opportunity to go after this. And what project is next on our list together? We've already identified additional funding and projects to do, I want to say, the raised crosswalks along the trail too. So we're working and identifying projects that we're putting on here that we've already said we're doing within the next couple of years. We've already have the funding, we just need the time to actually execute those projects. So it's just a continual back and forth as we identify time and then the funding to actually do the project. I'm with you in the sense that I do like SMART goals, and I hope that I do recognize that not everything can be a SMART goal, but that there are some that we can build in. And maybe this is not the one that we build some of those in, but rather our own circulation element. We did put some, there is things in here about doing the CIP, a 5-year CIP plan and things. Those are the things that I've added too. So recognizing some of the needs that we have. And so adding timing into that of saying, hey, with this next funding year, our budget cycle, we need to really nail down what is our 5-year CIP plan. What funding do we have coming down the pipeline, and which ones do we need to still go after for projects? I hope that answers that too.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further comments, I'll make a few. I'm a walker, not a bike rider. And obviously the particular lifestyles of the commission members influence the focus they have on an activity. So I walk every day, and like Ms. Nugent, I feel like I know the city like the back of my hand now. There are some sidewalk gaps not identified on the map. I'm not really sure whether it's too late to add those in or not.
Not too late. Let us know.
Okay, and so the sidewalk funding in the city of Sonoma is all development and remodel connected. There is no separate budget for sidewalk repairs. The way the system works is that if the remodel of a property exceeds a certain dollar amount, and it's changed over the years. When I was first on the council, it was $25,000, which used to be a lot of money. Now it's probably $125,000. But in any event, when a threshold for a remodel is reached, the condition is that if the sidewalk is not in existence, the homeowner is required to put in the sidewalk. So that's how sidewalks get developed. At one point, during my time on the city council, we had a discussion about filling sidewalk gaps. One of the council members suggested, well, we should decide as to whether to compel people to put in a sidewalk depending on the current status of sidewalks on the block. And if more than 50% of the houses have sidewalks, then we should require it. And if less than 50% have them, we shouldn't. Well, that got tossed as an idea, because basically nothing would ever get done. So it's regrettable that the sidewalks deteriorate, and they deteriorate for a variety of reasons. Subsidence of the material under the sidewalks, the intrusion of trees and living things that actually change the contours of the sidewalks, weather and drainage and all kinds of things, and the use of material. I could list off dozens of places in the city with dangerous sidewalks at this point. The city's options in those cases are to notify the property owner of a dangerous condition of the sidewalk, tell them that it has to be repaired, and if it isn't repaired, if I understand the process correctly, the city can go in and do the work and bill the property owner, and if necessary, place a lien on the property, get repaid if they refuse to pay for it. But it's a contentious process. It is really a contentious process. And when street trees that have been planted too close to the sidewalk or with the improper root area, then lift the sidewalk, and the property owner had nothing to do with the street trees, what they want to do is cut all the street trees down, and which of course eliminates trees. It's a complicated, sticky wicket, and it has been for as long as I've lived here. I think that my highest priority is pedestrian safety. I was walking across Broadway the other day in the crosswalk near the post office. I pushed the flashing lights. I'm very grateful for the flashing lights. As I was halfway across the street, a car ignored me, ignored the flashing lights, and just drove on through. They realized as they passed me that they were actually committing a violation of the law, and threw their hands up like this to go, well, what happened, you know? It's a dangerous situation, and And I actually know the woman who was critically injured in the accident on 8th Street East, Karen Sanders. And the crossing on 8th Street West, excuse me, is 5th Street West is incredibly dangerous. And I don't look at my phone and I don't think about anything but oncoming traffic when I cross our major streets in Sonoma. I consider it, I'm assuming that the drivers are not going to pay attention, and I will sometimes walk halfway across the street in the crosswalk and then wait to make sure that the car that's coming has seen me and stopped, and then I wave a thank you to them as I complete my crossing. It requires great attention as pedestrian. Now, it shouldn't have to, but that's the world we live in. I think we need to impose, and I don't know, these are political decisions, not decisions that can be made by this body. I would prefer to see the city council adopt policies for certain kinds of fees dependent on developments that would pay for bulb outs on streets and create conditions for safer crossings for pedestrians as just part of the normal development fee structure of applying for projects, both commercial and residential. And unless the city begins to develop some kind of budgetary revenue stream to do this work, it's not going to get done. Particularly in a city that currently has a $2.8 million general fund budget deficit, which the tax measure is simply going to fill. It's not going to add anything new to the budget. It's just going to fill the hole we've got. And I'm going to vote for it because of that, but I don't like it. I don't like sales taxes. I think it's a lousy tax. We're better off imposing some sort of development-connected fee to improve the infrastructure here, particularly for pedestrians. Now, I think in your report, if I recall correctly, you said that 35% of the population of the city of Sonoma is 65 and over. This is an aging community, and it's going to continue to age. We are not suddenly going to turn into a family community with lots of kids running around. We are a developed country, and the birth rates in developed countries have shrunk. In Japan, the whole communities have emptied out. You can buy a house in Japan for $1. The government owns them all. In Italy, they're paying people to come over and move into their small villages, which have been depopulated as the growth of the aging population has outstripped the replenishment of birth. We're just 10 years behind that curve. So I'm less concerned, honestly, about parts of the active transportation plan other than the walkability, because I think the walkability is going to be the issue and the increasing issue for this community. And as a pedestrian and as somebody who walks every day, I can see that we need to increase both the safety and the aesthetic pleasure of the ability to be able to walk around this town. I'm sure Dante would have appreciated your comments tonight. And you and I could have a separate conversation about planning health someday. I like the idea of SMART goals. If I understand it correctly, a SMART goal is something doable. Is that the definition of a SMART goal? Relevant, measurable, and doable. Yeah, specific. And I like that. I think that that's what we should be doing. I don't mind an aspirational effort. It's good. Our general plan has a lot of aspirational aspects to it. That's just the way it is, and we can look back and see what effect the aspirations have had on the development of the community. But at this point, as I've gotten older, I've become more and more practical. And my practical side says, what can we actually do? What is it that's going to meet the needs of the people in this community? That I'm interested in. So I will just leave it at that. Are there any other comments? thank you very much for coming tonight, spending time with us. I think there's a lot of great ideas in this plan. I don't know what the heck the city's going to do to finance them. If I were on the city council, I'd be telling our city manager, we need to hire a grant writer. And I believe a grant writer would pay for their own position if it's done appropriately. Usually on grants, there's like a 15% function that goes to the administration. I think we could easily support someone on staff as a graph writer, someone experienced who knows how to crank them out. And I don't know why we haven't had one. I've been asking about it for 20 years, but I guess it's just not a routine spot, although given the absence of state funding for things as a regular course of action, you know, when we had the redevelopment agency, there was always money coming in. That's gone, and it's been gone since 2012. So we have no choice now but to come up with methods of our own, but that requires political courage and risking somebody not liking your decision as a council member on what it is you've decided to make your priorities. So it's hard. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
How about just a 5-minute break for us oldsters?
Yeah. This is simpler than the issues that the transportation plan is trying to solve. So, good evening. The item before you is proposing amendments to Chapter 19.54. That's for planning permit approval and disapproval. And this is to create a clearer and more consistent regulations within Chapters 19.54 and 19.56 that pertain to post-approval periods for permit approvals. Staff is seeking a recommendation to the City Council for this item. Okay, so Chapter 19.56 provides regulations on permit implementation and time limits on permit approval. So in other words, it establishes the length of time an applicant has to act on an approval, permit, or whatever type of entitlement that is, and how much time they have before that expires. The chapter currently provides a 2-year post-approval time period, meaning the applicant has 2 years to commence the project, the use, or again, whatever the entitlement is. Chapter 19.54, which provides provisions on planning, permit, and approval, disapproval, also includes provisions for each type of permit, and within those provisions discusses the post-approval time periods in that chapter as well. So this differs from Chapter 19.56 2-year time period and can create confusion within the code, given staff would typically reference Chapter 19.56 for time periods. So in order to create more consistency within the code and reduce room for potential error, staff is seeking approval to amend the sections within Chapter 19.54. So a little history on how we may have gotten here. The ordinance was updated in 2003, and that replaced the 1975 ordinance that regulated zoning and regulations and standards. And then later, through Ordinance 01-2021, the 1-year expiration period provided in 19.56040 more specifically, was struck through and then replaced with a 2-year time period to exercise permit approval. This ordinance, the update also added the ability for applicants to apply for a 1-year time period extension if they met certain criteria. So staff believes it was at this time that it was just an oversight in updating Chapter 19.54 to match, and that resulted in the inconsistency. So the proposed amendments include replacing the expiration text for each of the entitlements listed up on the screen with a post-approval text, which would defer to Chapter 19.56 for permit implementation and time limits. The amendments made to Sections 19.54.040 and 050 are essentially the same for all other applicable sections or within the chapter. And the existing expiration text and the applicable provisions all read similarly, and that's that the entitlement shall be exercised within 1 year or it will become void. And then let's see. So pointing to the chapter that regulates permit implementation is a cleaner way and eliminates that room for potential error. Now, Section 19.54.090, which is the demolition, the second paragraph on the screen, it was pretty much already where we would like it to be, so it was just a little bit of minor cleanup. And additionally, staff wants to include a clause that the ordinance shall apply retroactively to permit approvals as of February 19th, 2021, since that's when the effective ordinance date was of the Ordinance 01-2021. So staff is recommending, the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of the amendments as presented, and that is all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions? Go ahead.
Just curious, I'm assuming that the 2 years is something that's a positive thing for developers?
Yeah, and when I went back and read the previous ordinances, those were all, it seemed like the intention with those was to make it an easier process. And I've heard even in my short time period here, both you, the Planning Commission and the council wanting a more streamlined act for folks. So this is sort of another way to provide that.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Willers?
I just have a quick question in relationship to a more recent housing law extensions of use permits, and how obviously the state law is going to override that because they've extended use permits on housing projects for, I believe, on some up to 5 years from the time of approval. Is there any conflict in our ordinance, or the state law would be basically supersede our local ordinance?
Yeah, it would supersede it. We're always mindful of that, especially now, even more so in the last 5 years, I would say. And I have seen language. I don't know of anything specifically as far as a time frame that the state has implemented. That's a longer time frame than that. But I have seen language around, as long as the applicant is showing good faith in keeping the project moving forward, that you can easily create those extensions.
Yeah, and that's through a notice and a letter and
Correct.
A planning commission hearing to get an extension of that use permit.
That's of the use permit itself, but it's also in the sense of the building permit.
Right.
Is where a lot of those longer extensions are applying, and it's the extension of the building permit specifically. So this is just for us a cleanup of what our current code has that's not clear. And then, as always, state law will look to, and sometimes that's more towards, like you said, it's a housing development type, and then a level of affordability.
Yeah.
What is staff's ability to follow up on entitlements that were granted and then not executed within the 2 years, so that we make sure that things don't just kind of slip through the cracks?
Well, that would be, in the case we often have applicants reach out and want to know about what they can do with their project, even though it is older. So that's when, I don't know if we would go beyond that to incentivize it, how we would reach out to past folks that have it's since expired. But as far as when we're working with them from this point on, and then anyone that comes forward that had an entitlement issued after 2021, we can let them know that we can still carry that through.
I'm thinking of some examples. One is the Sebastiani House B&B. And if that one doesn't, and I was confused, was it 1 year, was it 2 years? Now I understand why I was confused. What happens if they don't execute that permit within 2 years?
If they don't execute it nor ask for an extension within the required period of time, so I can't remember the exact dates, but there's a time frame that they have to, before that expiration, then it dies. And so we would then need to make note of that use permit that it expired. And so in our records, historically, we have actually marked on approved sets that things have expired, and then those get recorded as expired. And so we can do that also within our online system, that something is an expired permit.
Thank you.
So have you got some sort of cron file of permits so that if a permit is not affected within the time period, you get flagged?
We can, especially since Planning Commission had started actually doing resolutions. We've been a lot easier to track. And so we have a spreadsheet, and Natalie's working on that, trying to go back in history and create spreadsheets around all the resolutions and approvals that Planning Commission has done around, especially around the use permits. Design review, we typically see fast when they submit for a building permit. And let's say somebody came back and said, okay, I want a building permit for design review. Those are easier to track because we won't let them go through unless we can see that. It's the uses for like a business and things. If they didn't get a business license, or if they, on the Sebastiani one, they have a number of things they have to do to meet the conditions of approval. And so if those aren't completed, they would not be able to move forward and get a business license. So we're also doing a new business license process as well, and we're getting ready to implement. The city council has approved to use HTL to do our business licenses, and so we're going to be creating a new process with them that planning reviews all business licenses before they actually get approved or executed with finance department. Because that hadn't been happening in the past, so we weren't sure necessarily that somebody had pulled that business license for, let's say, a wine tasting use permit. We had done all the work, but did they get the business license? There wasn't that communication. So we're trying to make sure that those things are getting documented.
Oh, I understand. In this particular case, we're talking about, for example, if a project gets approved and gets the entitlement from the commission and it doesn't get appealed, then the clock starts ticking on what it is they have to do in a particular amount of time to effectuate the permit. And so it doesn't seem like that difficult a programming job to basically create a system so that there's a notification by the system of staff when something is even approaching the date whereby they have to effect a use. And therefore you can reach out to that property owner or developer before it expires and say, by the way, within the next 60 days, you need to start making improvements on the property. It can be grading, it can be whatever. You have to spend some money to effect your permit. And I mean, that would be a great tool to have so that it isn't a matter of finding out once something's expired that, oh, by the way, you missed your date. It would be great to be able to let people know you're coming up on your 2-year date to do something.
We can look into our current online system to see if there is, once we approve something in the system, that we can set a kind of a trigger date. I know that with like building permits, if we see no activity for 6 months, we generate a letter in the system to send to them to say, hey, there's been no activity, you're getting ready to be expired, and then you'll have to start all over again. And so we could build that also into the system at the 2-year mark, and see how that would work, how that flag would be created.
Yeah.
But we could work on that. Right now, we're a little old school. We love our spreadsheets and Access databases and Excel and workbooks, and
that's old.
so we're trying to move in that direction, and so we're still adapting that program, because it is new to us, and so we're still trying to figure those things out.
And
Okay.
just to add a little bit to that, at my previous place of work, we used OpenGov there, and had talked through that, and at that time we were not able to add that flag, which was unfortunate. That may have changed since, because I know they're developing their back end programs and their coding, so that may have changed, and we have discussions about trying to streamline our processes and procedures through OpenGov weekly, so I'm sure we'll get there. I also wanted to add, just to give a little bit more context too, in my experience and then in looking at other codes as well, the 2-year time frame is quite generous, just from my perspective. I've seen them from like 6 months to a year typically. So 2 years is a good amount of time, and obviously we want to make it easier on applicants, but we also don't want to create legal nonconformities often, which can be the case if you wait too long between approvals and commencing projects.
Well, I think we've asked our questions. We're looking for a motion in this.
Yes, but we should just, for fun, open public comment.
Okay, just for fun, will the mystery speaker please come up? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, and I will close the public comment, and I entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend to the City Council the adoption of an ordinance amending Sonoma Municipal Code 19.54 pertaining to the expiration times.
Second.
Thank you. We've got a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Nugent,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Gorman Jenkins.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Willers.
Yes.
Vice Chair Dambach,
Yes.
Chair Barnett.
Aye.
The motion passes 6-0-0-2.
Okay, and we're on to our last agenda item for the evening, other than staff reports, which is discussion about a recommendation to the council about 2-unit residential developments and parcel maps for lot splits. This is SB 9, am I not correct? Okay.
Sorry, I'm bringing up the ordinances. So I do, I'm just gonna go to cloud meeting just real quick. There's Alex. So Alex is joining us online. So there he is.
Good evening, Alex.
So Alex, if you remember from the last time we discussed SB 9, he is helping us with, from the attorney's perspective, on the SB 9 ordinance. And so I worked with him specifically on this ordinance draft that is presented to you tonight. And so he will have the ability to speak, but you will not see him because you'll be looking at the Word docs. I thought that would be easier than trying to do a PowerPoint with all those sections. So, so what I used to do with my old jurisdiction when I would do big, huge ordinance changes is that we would just go through them, just so that we both don't miss anything. So I did want to just provide you guys also an update. So since we last met in August 22nd, 2024, the state has adopted a new bill, shocker, on SB 450. I think I've been 405 again, sorry. SB 450, and that bill, when it goes into effect on January 1st, 2025, by the time we finish discussing this and it goes to City Council, we'll be there. So we went ahead, Alex informed me of this change, and so we went ahead and made some additional changes that I hadn't anticipated specifically into this ordinance as well. So with SB 450, the state has clarified, we'll say, some very specific aspects of SB 9. One of those is a change, and thank you, Donna, for pointing out I missed one of the changes on the urban lot split and on the 2-unit development. They have struck the requirement that it would not demolish more than 25% of existing exterior walls. So that has been struck from both, and so we've struck that from the ordinances themselves. I just failed to strike that out of in the staff report. The other change that came with this new law, it did modify that required the finding to deny a project. It removed the physical environment from consideration, and so it was just now on public health and safety is the focus of that. No more of the physical environment and any impacts on that. It also states a timeline in which an application must be approved or denied, and that is now 60 days. So we have made those changes throughout as well. And then the last thing is that it specifically states that we do need to take into consideration that underlying zoning and that we cannot be more restrictive. We can be more giving, but we cannot be more restrictive than the underlying zoning. So those changes have also been made throughout this code. So I am going to zoom in on here.
While I'm reading this sheet,
Sure.
am I reading this correctly that we are now saying that SB 9 is applicable to the low-density residential district?
So when we had discussed it in August, I had specifically in June said we could strike the RL and the RS zones, so residential low and residential Sonoma district. And then per the discussion of the commission in August, the majority stated they wanted to keep all 4 districts that we had previously identified. And so that has been maintained, hasn't been modified in this ordinance.
And does Alex have an opinion because the previous recommendation of staff was that because we allowed duplexes in the RL zone, SB 9 did not apply. Does Alex now have an opinion about whether it does or it does apply?
Yeah, I remember we talked about this last time as well, and I didn't disagree with the majority opinion. I pointed out that it's pretty vague because this is intended for single-family zones. SB 9 is about single-family zones, but the definition of a single-family zone is not defined in state law. That's the problem. So we have to interpret it. And we provided 2 different interpretations, if you remember last time. One was that how can you have a single-family zone if your single-family zone has duplexes in it, was one interpretation. So if it allows duplexes, it can't be single-family, was one interpretation. The other interpretation, which HCD adopted, which is also what you guys adopted, which I don't disagree with. I think it's the safest interpretation, is you look at the primary character of the zone, and based on the primary character, you make a determination. But the primary character shouldn't be determined by like development standards. It should be determined by, what are the most common types of uses in that zone, and if the most common types of uses are single family, that's probably what it is.
Okay, and so then just one further clarification, which we may get to in this discussion anyway, is this would mean that in the RL zone, a lot split could take place, 2 primary units could be created, and at least 1 ADU for each of those primary units, creating a total of the potential of 4 units on an RL zoned lot. Do I understand that correctly?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, again, just to chime in, under SB 9, the max number of units you can get maximum is 4 out of a single parcel.
All right, so with that, are we ready to begin to go through? All right, so we'll keep this a little less formal than normal. So as I'm going through it, if you have questions or comments, we can just go right into them, and we'll just keep moving through. So the first section we're going to do is on 2-unit development. And so this is the current code. And then underline means there's added text. Strike through means I removed the text. And sometimes I removed the text, like in this case here, because it's just duplicative and it just didn't need to be said twice. So here is just a clarification on the government code section, and then the applicability. So not a lot of change. And then the purpose section. Definitions, I have added a few definitions. Sufficient for separate conveyance was never defined clearly, and so we've added that. And then ministerial, we all know what it is, but just to make sure everybody else does. And then, go ahead.
If I understand you correctly, it's okay to jump in.
Yes?
Is there any form of design review on any of these units?
There is not.
No. Okay.
2-unit residential development or project.
I'm sorry.
There's okay.
Just further clarification. So there is no design review, but development standards still apply.
Correct.
Okay.
And we'll get to that section. All right, so then, again, 2-unit, we've already talked about it. I just added a clarifying sentence or component of a sentence that the residential units may be located in a single building that contains 2 units, and also known as a duplex, or in 2 detached buildings. So when you have, just to clarify, it doesn't have to be attached and it doesn't have to be detached. It can be either one. So it's just a clarifier. I changed planning director to community development director throughout. Let's see. We did post entitlement instead of just construction permits. Again, it's just a clarifying language. No real change there. Okay, here's the change. Maximum number of units. So previously was the text above, and it said new dwelling units proposed as part of a 2-unit residential development must be primary dwelling units. New accessory dwelling units and new junior accessory dwelling units are not permitted. So under the state law, it's actually, it could be 4 units of any type. So whether it's 2 primary units and then an ADU or a junior ADU, the key is max 4. And so we are clarifying that in these 2 sections. One is if you don't have an urban lot split, you can have the 2 primary and then each one can have an ADU. Or if you do an urban lot split, you can have 4 primaries, or you can have just 1 primary on 1 lot and maybe an ADU. But again, the key is no more than 4. Does that make sense? And so that's what that text is about. Again, more just clarifying in the sense of the building code and the requirements for separate conveyance, that we need to make sure that each one of the dwelling units does have separate gas, electric. The requirement by the state law is that they can be individually sold at the end of the day.
I'm sorry. When you say they can be individually sold, and if I understand changes in the ADU law, that you could end up with 4 separately owned units on the original parcel.
That's correct.
That's correct. So you end up, but you do not have to do a lot split on a separately conveyed and owned ADU.
You do not. You can do a condo map. So again, Alex, can you remind me, the law around the ADU separate conveyance, that is something that the city specifically has to adopt to allow. And we have not done that.
Or could you
Yeah,
do
that's an option available to you, but
yeah, we have
I don't
not.
know of any city that's adopted separate conveyances for ADUs.
I see. So that's not something that's basically that authority has not been preempted by the state to allow a separate conveyance of an ADU.
Correct. So the only thing that the state law says that we have to allow around the separate conveyance of an ADU is if it was to go to a nonprofit.
Okay.
The
And so are we making a recommendation to the council about the conveyance, a separate conveyance of an ADU? And the only then question I've got is that, and Alex will probably have to answer this, how do you sell a unit on a piece of property without selling the piece of property? In other words,
A tenant in common agreement.
so this is why it goes under the condo law, and that's the only way you can do it?
They can do it as a tenant in common without going through the condo law.
Okay. Alex, do you agree with that?
I do, and I just want to clarify what you're asking. Are you saying if the nonprofit is to
No.
sell the ADU?
No, we're not talking about a nonprofit. We're talking about somebody who, under SB 9, splits the property, sells the second property, and each of the two parcels that now have been created create an ADU, which, if the city approves the separate conveyance provision, allows the owners on those properties to sell the ADU separately without an additional lot split in what Sheila is calling a tenancy in common. Was that what the term? So are you familiar with this tenancy in common provision that would allow for the separate conveyance of the ADU?
So there's different forms of property ownership in California. Like a joint tenancy is when you own one property 100% together. A tenancy in common, as I understand it, is you own a property, but it could be 50% ownership for each. So you could divide up the ownership in a lot, 50% you, 50% me, and thereby, I'm assuming, own them separately. I'm assuming
But
that's
can
how
you
you
do it
I've
at
never seen
different
happen.
percentages? Because an ADU is going to be typically smaller than a primary unit.
Yeah, you can. It's contractual.
Okay, thank you. So that was the other question. Are we going to make a recommendation to the city regarding the conveyance law?
I would have to bring that to you and agendize that if that's something that you would like us to bring forward. I did not have that on my list to bring forward to you. We will, Alex and I are, we missed each other's phone calls today, but we are going to be working on the ADU law next because there have been a lot of changes on that one in the last couple of years since we last did it. So we'll save that ADU discussion for the ADU discussion.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have a question. The lot splits, do I assume that then these lots have been assigned different APNs?
That's correct. So right now, we're just talking about 2-unit developments, and then we have another code section that specifically talks to the urban lot split, which is similar process in the parcel map requirements. It's just we can't require as much as we would normally do on a lot split as far as improvements and such. Here we go. Easements, standard language, minimum rental period. Just going back to just looking at what we require currently and around SB 450. So anything less than 30 days, we don't allow. That's the vacation rental. So anything more than that would be our normal period of time. We can't create special rules that don't apply to other residential units. And so that is why I struck this one, because it said 6 months. So it is.
Let's say you're not sharing the screen. Sorry, cut you off.
You're not seeing this?
No.
Sorry, Jorge? There we go. The screen that they see is out there, so they were looking at me because I was talking. All right. So thank you, Alex. If that happens again, just let us know. deed restriction, also just clarifying, just taking some of the language that we had in here that doesn't apply, and then adding some just additional information in regards to any kind of covenant that would be required. We do want to make sure that anything that's using SB9 is recorded for perpetuity, so that we understand what allowed its development history. And if somebody then purchases that property, they understand that they are restricted to those restrictions as well. And if they want to change that or anything about it, then they would need to bring everything into compliance with our code. All right. And so this again, just clarifying that fees are still required with any development. All right, so in here with the prohibitions, I restated specific language that's from the state law, and it's more because it's very specific in the state law, and having to go to the state law, it then tells you to go to another state law, and it just gets really confusing. In addition, Alex pointed out that it specifically stated that the law as it was stated in 2021. And so we want to make sure that we get that language locked in. And so that is why when I strike through things that we're talking about, the wetlands, the high fire, and the earthquake, I am restating it through here. So that was a summary of all these components. So this is why that's all written out. It's also because it helps us, as well as the applicants, understand what is required around like the high fire severity zones, or very high fire, and that our fire code will prevail in those senses, as well as within our flood zones. So it doesn't say that you can't build this, it just says that you will have to meet these requirements. Okay. Historic resources, this is the clarifier, and we had talked about previously too. The way that the law is written is that it has to be actually listed. So they have to be in a historic district and designated per our ordinance or on the state resources. So Natalie has been working on our local inventory, trying to get it all posted soon, hopefully on our GIS system and within OpenGov. We have a lot of some things that are been identified as historic, but they're actually not. So we may have had an updated resource evaluation that applies to them and things like that. We also updated our list a few years ago, and so that has not been incorporated into our GIS system online.
And why, may I ask, has the historic overlay district been stricken?
Because that a historic overlay district is a planning zone overlay. It is not an actual designation of a historic district. So our historic districts in town are the Plaza, Depot, Sebastiani Residences, Broadway. What am I thinking? Is that 5? Yeah, I think that's the 5. So those are our actual 5 districts.
And what about a separately designated historic structure that is not within a district?
Those would be our actual, our local historic resources list, or if it's individually listed on the state's list.
So they would be exempted.
They would not be allowed to have a SB9.
Right.
And that's the list that Natalie is working on. All right, the other prohibition according to the state law is in regards to rental units. So this was specifically, basically word from the text of the state law. This is where we struck the 25%, that was previously in there. And then I added just this little section just on non-conforming. I had this in when I wrote this code for another jurisdiction, and it just, again, it's just some text to just help clarify when we have these non-conforming, existing non-conforming developments, that if you want to use SB 9, we do want you to meet the requirements of this chapter. So we do want you to, if you're trying to use SB 9 to become conforming, is the intent of this section right here.
But nothing in this would prohibit a site already developed with 2 units from adding ADUs.
So this is where if we're doing SB 9, then we're adding the 2 additional units under SB 9, so the ADUs. So is it already a duplex and non-conforming? And then we would just need to apply this chapter on how we are going to add ADUs. So because they are a non-conforming use in some zones.
Vis-a-vis SB 9.
Vis-a-vis SB 9.
But if they didn't want to exercise SB 9 and do any kind of lot split, a 2-unit duplex parcel owner could add an ADU or 2 ADUs.
They can add 2 detached ADUs to multifamily per state law.
Okay, thank you.
This is all the same text, keeping our Creekside information and things that we know apply universally. Added some text around replacement housing. So there is a state law that says if you are, let's say you had 2 units and you demolish the 2 units, you need to replace the 2 units. You can't demolish 2 and just put 1. So this is just to make sure that everybody's aware of that law. And then development standards that are in planned unit development will apply to any housing development. It's just to make sure that we're encompassing other parts of our laws. The state law does state that we cannot require correction of non-conforming issues as far as our development standards as a condition of approval. So if they are on the property line, we can't make them move over. This is similar to the ADU law with the conversion of space. We can't make, if you want to convert, let's say, a garage that's 2 feet from a property line, we can't make them move it to the 4 foot.
Can we go back to the replacement housing? I just want to make sure that I understand this. So any 2-unit building that exists in our jurisdiction, even under our current code, that is essentially non-conforming, if someone was to tear that down, they would have to replace 2 units?
Alex?
If it's non-conforming, I actually don't know the answer to that. So I'm not sure. I'd have to look into it. I have to research that question.
I think, so I'll let you look into it and see what our attorney says around non-conforming in the sense of the duplex, but also unpermitted. So that is something that we run into, is unpermitted living spaces.
What I'm thinking of is a duplex. It was built, it's permitted as a duplex. So I'm just curious. more than anything.
Okay,
because-
we'll look into that, so the non-conforming, but then also the unpermitted aspects.
It's not
Yeah,
a
so
project
if
that I
it, if
do.
it's, I can confirm now, if it's non-conforming, if it's non-conforming, it has to be replaced. If it's unpermitted, it doesn't have to be replaced.
Okay.
Because the state's only counting the number of permitted units, and the whole idea is we don't want to reduce the number of permitted units in a city.
Jennifer,
Sure.
I have a question on this one. Why are roof decks not allowed? I love roof decks.
I meant to strike that part, sorry, I got it, I remembered it on another one and I forgot it on this one. So this
Yay.
is another one of those development standards that we don't have in the other sections of our code as they apply to homes. We don't, I actually just asked Diane this question today, because we have a plan on our desk right now. I was like, does it say that anywhere in our code? So let me strike that, so thank you. This is why we go through together.
I think what it says is you have to have a, what is it called, the wall?
Pit
A
wall.
parapet.
So the creation of flag lots to accommodate a 2-unit residential. I struck this from this section because it's not really associated with 2-unit residential, but rather the urban lot split. And then there's a whole nother section in the urban lot split that we talk about kind of what we can do. So then going to the objective design standards, again, this is where I added the tenancy of the 30 days for rentals. The other reminder that we have to allow up to 2 units that are 800 square foot each. And so just to clarify again, what that means is on these small lots with the setbacks that are allowed under SB 9 of that reduced side and rear setbacks, if that 800 square feet still can't fit, it can push into that front setback requirement.
But people are not restricted to a maximum of 800 square feet, am I right?
So we have to, they can go for as big as our FAR
Right.
and our site coverage and all of our regular development standards would allow. But if that lot is so constrained, so example, the 1,200 square foot lot, with, you know, depending on its configuration, but if it was only 20 feet wide and we had the 2 4s and then we're doing 2 units of 800, we're at 1,600, so right there. So we just have to, I just want to make sure you're aware that that's possibly, I don't think it will ever happen because development wise, but we'll see. But I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. And then a lot of these clarifications are that, again, the underlying zoning is what is going to prevail. So RL, RS, as our current code states, in this specific planning area, this is what our FAR is, this is what our site coverage is, this is our front setback. We want to have our garages setbacks, things like that. These are all in here, they still apply. We just have to make concessions around the side and the rear setback, and then also to allow the 2,800 units. Okay? This is something for consideration that I added, and it goes with the code as well, because it does say the 4 feet and 16 feet. So anything, we could say that you can just be whatever that underlying zoning height is at the 4 foot mark, or we can just kind of limit that. We currently limit any accessory structure. We have basically what I would call like a pitched roof or a step back when you're a certain distance from the side with accessory structures. And this would kind of be that same idea as saying, hey, if you're in this reduced side yard setback, then we want to keep your height down. And then once you're in our normal setback, you can come up to whatever that max height is for that zone. So before, we had specific requirements in regards to plate height and one-story structure and two-story structure, but we do not have those standards within our existing code. So that is why it is struck. Again, setbacks. We have definitions for corner lots and how we do setbacks. So I have struck this to make sure that we are using what we actually have in our code for definitions in this section. Because they were getting a little bit more specific as far as where that driveway could be located and where it couldn't be located. So again, just going to what our code specifically states for those specific zones in those planning areas. This section, I didn't strike it. I mean, it's just standard things that we have in other sections, so I just left it. I just modified just struck a little bit of it, but we do have requirements around distance between buildings in another part of our code, and between accessory structures in our main buildings. And so that is why I just struck that there. In case we change it one place, I don't want to change it lots of places. Here, the off-street parking,
Question about this.
Sure.
I'm having difficulty imagining a circumstance where in a lot split, and typically our lots are deeper than they are wide, how you would provide for the parking, the off-street parking, without the provision of a very long driveway to the now new rear lot. I mean, that's going to use up a tremendous amount of square footage of both the existing lot and the portion that it takes up of the new lot. How do you see that working? And maybe Mr. Willers can jump in on this.
It's not for us to figure out. That's all I can say. This is, we have development standards that are in our development code in terms of site coverage, FAR, how you utilize a parcel. If you can't come up with a solution to utilize the parcel under this, even though state law allows you to do this, you can't do it. So.
Is that true, Alex?
That's correct. I agree with that.
Okay. I don't know what it creates. To me, it creates for example, the house I own, I have no plans to do a lot split. My parcel's only 50 feet wide. It's a substandard. I mean, most of the lots in my neighborhood are another 10 feet wider, 60 feet. It basically, to extend essentially a driveway to a rear portion of the lot would eliminate a huge portion of both lots, because I'd have to go through the front lot that would now be separate in order to access the rear lot. I mean, I don't see how it's even possible to do it.
So that is fundamentally an issue that has to be solved, and it will also, in my opinion, determine whether or not it's financially feasible to do this. SB 9 is one of those laws that allows a lot of things to happen, but also there's a point of practicality with it. There aren't a lot of SB 9 things being developed in the state of California right now. And the primary reason is there aren't a lot of single-family residential properties that are undervalued enough to even take this up. Because essentially what you end up doing is reducing your property value and spending a lot of money to accomplish nothing, really. And other than an additional unit or 3 by state law. So in certain jurisdictions, they may be more prevalent. In jurisdictions where they have odd lot sizes, they'll probably be less prevalent. And in jurisdictions where the underlying property values are super high, they're going to be even less prevalent. So,
Can I add to that also? The SB 9 has been kind of a flop because, in part, actually also because these development standards that you guys are all striking, a lot of cities, what they did is they adopted SB 9 ordinances, and then they created specialized development standards for these SB 9 ordinances that made SB 9 infeasible. So the state came in and said, okay, no more of these specialized development standards. You got to use the underlying development standards in whatever zone applies. So that's kind of what we're doing now. But it's been a flop. A lot of the housing production we're getting is in these single family zones is because of ADUs. It's not really SB 9.
In our city, we also don't see a lot of ADUs either because it is very costly to build an ADU here. We were talking with the sewer, just a sewer connection for an ADU is now almost $18,000 just to connect. So all these things I'm learning. But so we're doing the ordinance to comply with the law, and we'll see what comes forth with it. And as we've all noted, there are a lot of constraints, and we have people reaching out and saying, it's even costly, the constraints to build on a single family lot with a single family home these days in town. So and still get a profit. So we'll see what happens. In the sense of the parking, go ahead. Do you have a question? So I added the or uncovered. And when we talked about multifamily, we talk about uncovered parking, and the more we cover our lots with buildings and things, so that's where I added the uncovered as that option. And then added the section that's in the state law. Doesn't really apply to us, probably will never apply. We do not have high quality transit corridor nor a major transfop. So, but it's there and it's in the law, so we've added it. And then also added a requirement that if you are demolishing your garage or carport or other covered parking to create a new unit, that you still need to replace that each one of those units. ADUs are different. ADUs don't require that, but for an actual second unit, we are going to require a parking space.
I appreciate that you added the uncovered.
All right, so nothing's changed on the access, stormwater management. Landscaping, again, we have a landscaping section of our code, and we are referencing that they need to comply with our WILO requirements and our landscape standards. So we're striking the specific standards that were created and just making sure that they comply with the other standards. The outdoor common open space, I didn't strike it. It is consistent with what we have in our code under each one of those standards. I could strike it and just reference that they need to comply with whatever the development standards are. That way, if we don't treat it the similar in the other sense, that if we do modify anything, I don't have to modify it here too. So that is
Could this be another section that's cited rather than,
Yeah, that's what.
and I'm only thinking because in the future we may end up changing the open space requirements.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No change to the utilities and affordable housing. We cannot apply the affordable housing because that is not something that applies. We have our law set, our city's code says 5 units or more. And ADUs are exempted from affordable housing. So I did strike that from this. If we do adopt an impact fee for residential, in the future, we could apply those fees to new housing. So when you add a new unit, you can charge fees around that for affordable housing. We have not adopted that. We only adopted the commercial impact fee. Denial is just basically restating the law. Oops, I didn't strike this part. Delete. There we go. And that's it for that one. Any questions before I go to, so I have some cleanup, but other than that, any questions before I go to urban lot split? Nope. Okay.
I have a question / comment following up on Alex's opinion, and I think he's right. Yeah, I know he's right. We all know he's right. SB9's been a flop, and it's been intensive for you guys and for everybody on staff and everybody working on this. And I know there's a certain amount we have to do, but I also want us to be conscious of the fact that this is a whole lot of time and energy and resources put into something that's really not going to get much action. So whatever we can do to minimize your efforts in this, I think would be appreciated.
And I will just add that I classify this kind of behavior by the state to be what I call crazyville. And I don't know how and when it's going to stop, but this is just nuts.
All right, so in the urban lot split, I was trying to clean it up to be a little bit more similar to the 2-unit development in the sense of how it was formatted. So I'm not striking the definitions that you see here, I'm just moving them to its own section. So you'll get to that. And I was trying to minimize the amount of changes and not trying to rewrite the whole ordinance to limit the time I spent on this. So that's why I didn't do a lot of change in some cases, and you will see some duplicative things, but tried to just reference other sections. So with that, everything you see above is the same. Definitions, added a couple of definitions for acting in concert with an owner, because this is not defined under state law. And also, what is an adjacent parcel, and then what common ownership or control means. And so this is just helpful for us as well as our applicants when applying. So this applies into different parts in the urban lot split section. So acting in concert with an owner, you can't have 2 parcels next to each other owned by the same people and both trying to subdivide using SB9. That's not allowed. The idea is that, let's say a developer came into town, they bought a whole site, then they subdivided it, and then they wanted to subdivide it all under SB9. That's not feasible under this. You also can't work in concert with somebody else. You can't be like a partner and have one LLC and you're named on that one and another LLC and you're named on that one. So that's just trying to make sure that people aren't trying to take advantage. All right. There's nowhere in the law that specifically says that with an urban lot split that you actually have to develop. So we have struck that from this section. You could do an urban lot split and have no units on it and still have no units with that urban lot split. However, there is a deed saying that you used SB 9 to do your urban lot split and what your restrictions are around that.
But you can sell that
You can
subdivided lot.
One of them.
One of them, yes.
Correct. Ouch. There is a, if you own it and you live there, you also have to reside there, right? So there is that component of one of the 4 units. It is an affidavit. It is not a actual. Yes.
Unenforceable.
Yeah, it's not enforceable. It's a nice thing to have. Okay. Again, these are just some clarifications, and also just some cleanup as far as, you know, I will work with our city engineer and our public works director on these. We do process the lot line adjustments and our urban lot splits through the planning department. At the end of the day, it's the engineering that says whether that map is acceptable and can move forward and go get recorded and things. So it's kind of a combination work together, just like our parcel map process is. That's why we're referencing Title 16 of our subdivisions. A lot of the same application materials need to be provided. The difference is in regards to the restrictions, which I'll get to, but it's the same restrictions as 2-unit development. If it's, you know, in a prime farmland, if it's a historic site, you cannot apply for an urban lot split under this. You can apply for a lot line adjustment, or, you know, but it has to meet the development code, not SB 9. Again, denial. Just
What would be a circumstance of health and safety that would prompt a denial?
I honestly don't know.
I got an example,
Thank
a real
you.
life example. But this relates to ADUs, but it's the same logic. We had an ADU that wasn't able to connect to our sewer main without a sewer main extension that they didn't want to pay for. They wanted to put in septic, and we didn't allow the septic, so there was a health and safety concern because of the slope of the lot and all that stuff, and we denied their ADU. And you could have the same rationale for the SB 9.
So there is requirements that if it's not connecting, so we do have some lots in town that still aren't on our sewer. They're still septic. So there is another section in the code that does talk about they have to pass the test if they want to expand their septic system. So that would have to be, you know, part of that. So that could be. Or have water access. So all of our normal building safety requirements don't meet our fire. If they're in the high fire zone, don't meet the fire. So with that as an example, I would think that those could be other examples. Let's see. So again, these are just the specific prohibitions that we already commented on, so we're again not trying to restate things. We're trying to reference our other section for the prohibitions. And then also, per the state law, you can't split again after you've already split it under a time. This is the acting in concert that we've already talked about. And then I struck all about the housing because we referencing it back in the other section of the code. Already referenced the subdivision regulations. And then here, just making sure that we're clarifying what we're talking about for the development standards being in this chapter in Title 16. So this is just restating what we had before, and this fact that the maximum number of dwelling units that would be permitted. And then we already had the statement that a new accessory dwelling unit and junior dwelling unit would not be permitted in addition to the 2 primary residential units on each lot. So it's just clarifying again, 4 total. And that's what we also discussed at the August meeting, that you did not want to, majority was that we do not want to allow for more than the 4. Here's the owner occupancy that we just commented on. Nothing changed in this area. This is just an edit to the rental terms. All right. Going back up here. A floor area height, that's more in relation to the 2-unit development. So we are referencing to go to chapter 19.41 specifically. If we're talking about 2-unit development and what those development standards are, we are keeping the development standards specifically to urban lot split in this section. So in regards to the parcel design and let's see. Didn't change anything here. Now that I'm thinking about it, I do need to check this part on what we consider calculation of the lot area. We've talked, none of this has changed. Everything needs drainage in town. I didn't change this section in regards to the lot lines. It doesn't, these aren't development standards, this is just kind of what we're hoping for when we comes to actually like the development of the lots themselves. It's saying, we do allow a flag lot, or, you know, even though it's not my favorite thing in the world to have flag lots by any means, at the very least, all lots will need access. And whether that's a flag lot or the access easement. So we have lots in town where we just have an access easement, so a shared driveway to a rear parcel. You see that quite a bit in town where we've seen the homes remain in the front and then new development occurring in the back. We will still have the same requirements as far as, fire goes for access, and depending on the number of units and the distance from fire hydrants and things like that. So all of those will still apply. And I see Commissioner Willer shaking his head because he knows it's very expensive. And it's very, there's a lot of requirements that we have around turnarounds, if you're a certain distance, things like that. So those all still apply. We are looking to create regular size lots, dividing either parallel to the street, perpendicular to the street, depending on what that configuration is. Because we know our lots in town, most are square, rectangular.
So one of the reasons for citing the, for not allowing flag lots in the original ordinance was there was a lack of clarity on how the lot square footage would be calculated. And the idea was that the flag, the pole of the flag lot, shouldn't be an element of that calculation of square footage because it's simply an access easement. And it's going to be there to reach the back however, right? And so that was really the intent behind that. And I don't know, something in the back of my mind says that it's already in our development code that pole is not an element of calculation for coverage, blah, 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 blah. But I'm not positive about that. I'm just bringing kind of the historical reference for the, for the restriction of the flag lot. And then there's also the requirement that that the lots can be split down to a minimum 40/60, right? And so that flag lot that pole becomes really important in that calculation also. So it's just a way of clarifying that we make orderly development out of this mess, basically.
So right now, I didn't remove that you could, so right now it says that a flag lot or a lot with narrowing projecting strip of land is not permitted. It's good planning zoning practice to not allow flag lots. But because of a lot of the shape of lots here historically, it is common to have flag lots and or the easement situation. I'll look up as far as the flag lot requirements, and then we can make that modification to this in response for how we create a flag lot and how that is determined when we calculate that size. Because I wanted to look up how any other restrictions that we put around lot size.
Here's the illogical cascade of events. Someone creates a flag lot. The access is part of the area calculation for the lot. The lot is 1,200 square feet, and you're required to allow 2 800 square foot units on that. And you can't restrict it in any way. You have to allow that. That's the kind of craziness of it in my mind.
I see what you're saying. This one I struck as well. I did talk to Alex about this. You can put the lot line where you need to put the lot line, regardless of what's on the site already, to meet that 50-50 or 60-40. My goals will always be, with staff and with the applicants to try to get that line as best we can so that we're not sitting on property lines with buildings. But that we can't move that line just because. Now, you cannot put a lot line through a building. That is not allowed. I can tell you that.
This reminds me of sharing a room with my sister, and she divided the room, and she had the door, and I didn't.
Yeah, we do have buildings in town that are on 2 separate parcels, but we won't do that anymore. So we will as we move forward, we'll make sure that we don't do that anymore. Because it makes it really hard when they come for a tenant improvement and the line is through the building. Okay. Access easements. This should be consistent with what is required for fire. So I didn't really change anything here. And I am. And then struck here the affordable one. And that's it.
Okay. That was exciting.
I know.
Any comments on this?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have we had any applicants
I have one right now.
under SB 9?
I have one right now.
But it's an undeveloped parcel, right? Or it's a very large parcel.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for doing this.
No problem.
All right. Unless there are no comments from the public, open and close the public comment. Any further comments from the commission? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I have one basic comment, anywhere where we can cite, so that when we revise codes, that we're referring back to the part of the development code. I think the cleanup that you've done in terms of citing different sections rather than repeating different sections, even the fire code, because the fire code changes every code cycle, and those dimensions change as well. And so from a clarity standpoint for someone who's a user of these things, I'd rather go look at another code section and have it right than rely on one, right?
Okay. Alex?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I can't see you. So with the cleanup that I need to do with just some reciting of things, should I do that and then bring it back for approval? Or for the recommendation?
Are your cleanup items things that you think, like, you know what the edit needs to be, or you need to go and research it further?
I think there's just one thing I wanted to just research, but in general, it's just citing our other code sections instead of repeating it here.
So if you're going to vary from what you have in front of you, then I think the Planning Commission should make the recommendations subject to, and then list what the variances are. So you might want to help them craft that motion.
Do you mind if I just bring it back in November?
No, I think it would be good for you to bring it back.
Thank you.
None of us could undertake that particular motion.
No, I was going to have a heart attack. No, I'm just kidding.
Unless you would like to do it, Alex.
No, I think there's too many.
Yeah.
So should we make a motion to continue it?
Yes.
And you'll bring it back at a date uncertain?
I'll bring it back to the next meeting.
Next meeting? Okay.
Is that a motion?
Uh-huh.
Okay,
So
can I
make
hear
a motion
Can I hear a second?
to continue this to the very next meeting?
Okay, we have a motion and a second, Natalie.
Commissioner Nugent?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Gorman Jenkins?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Yes.
Commissioner Willers?
Yes.
Vice Chair Dambach?
Yes.
Chair Barnett?
Aye,
The motion passes 6-0-0-2.
thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Alex.
My pleasure.
Okay, the Development Director reports or comments?
Yes, so I did want to let you know that we had a meeting on the general plan couple weeks ago, the 14th of October, and presented, Chair Barnett and I presented what we discussed here, and then Chair Barnett presented what the actual discussion from the commission was, and your all's perspective. And then we had City Council weigh in on the same items to move forward. I am going to be meeting with our consultant to go over everything, see where we are, and basically adjust the calendar and redo a calendar around this. And then I'll let you guys know, because I do want to do a community meeting once we have that map cleaned up, and then move from there. So we are hitting the holiday season though, so yeah, everything shuts down between Thanksgiving and the New Year. So I did want to let you know that. I also wanted to let you know that there was an appeal of the church lighting. I was able to turn it around quickly with the help of our new planner Diane over here, and we got that to the City Council meeting earlier this week on Monday, and that appeal, the Planning Commission decision for approval was upheld for that item. The cooperage is still ongoing into the next meeting on the 6th. Let's see. You commented on all the special meetings, and so I just want to bring it to your attention that I will be working with the clerk to create a different calendar that goes to City Council. I don't know if you guys were following the conversation around Transcendence coming back next year, but that impacts all of our Planning Commission meetings again. So in order to not do the special meeting, I looked at what the code says, and City Council has to set the calendar. And so they need to set the regular meeting schedule. And so I wanted to let you know that I will be reaching out and giving you some of my thoughts on what those meeting dates that are affected and what those changes would be, so that we can have them as regular set meetings and get that calendar actually adopted at the end of this year for next year. And we'll let you know at our November meeting if we have any items for December. We are getting back to the light time of the season for Planning Commission, and but we have lots of ordinances. Ordinances. I'm a long-range planner by
Coffee.
love.
We need coffee next time.
Okay, any commissioner comments? Mr. Willers?
I think one of the interesting things is that in our general plan discussion on the 14th, that if those of you didn't look at the meeting or hear, that the City Council basically went along with the idea that duplexes and fourplexes are going to be allowed by right. So we've been talking about SB 9, and the City Council basically has done it, codified it in a way in which I think will make it more tenable to do, and it will undermine essentially SB 9.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Just have one comment too, that at that meeting on the 14th that came up, that maybe we can also consider as we're doing our site coverage and our setbacks, is to consider minimizing the front setback. That was suggested by Sandra Lowe.
Okay, and I would just say that I had the pleasure of attending and making a brief presentation to the Rotary Club of Sonoma Valley at Ms. Nugent's invitation. And ironically enough, tried to convey to them the sense of just how crazy planning has become because of all these state laws. I got some comments afterwards that people appreciated it, and this is not the first time I've had people react as I talk about both the volume of the state housing laws and the difficulty it's posing for small jurisdictions and large jurisdictions to keep up with this flurry of legislation, which, as the attorney has noted, is often poorly written and ambiguous and in conflict with each other in terms of the provisions of the different laws that are passed. So what we were doing tonight for the last hour or so, or more, is a perfect illustration of the cost and effort that we have to go through for something that appears to be a relatively rare and unusual occurrence, simply imposed through the whims of the legislature. Obviously, I haven't thought it through. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had to go through this exercise tonight for basically little purpose other than complying with the law. Anyway, with
Larry, you were very well received, and speaking to a attentive audience, and it was very well done, and would love to have you come back again at a later date just to keep us all informed and up to date.
anytime, thank you. Okay, anything else before we conclude? Can I have a motion to adjourn if we are done?
I move to adjourn.
Second. Oh.